Hi, my name is Jessica Klein, and I'm actually right now working in consulting in the ultra rare space. I'm doing some volunteer work for a team called Tin Soldiers Global. It's a rare patient organization that is looking and finding patients throughout the world with an ultra rare disease called Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. But I've been in the industry for a long time, and I come to it as a mother of a child who had a rare disease. So I'm really interested in helping parents and families find solutions and helping children to have a better future. So Tin Soldiers is an amazing grassroots group that has been dedicated to the space of FOP and is looking to find patients throughout the world that may have not been found. FOP, as I mentioned, is a very, very rare disease. Right now we believe there's thousands of patients that may have not been found, and it's our duty and our responsibility to find them so that we can help protect their futures. Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva is a disease that children are born with. It's very, very rare because it is from a single alteration in one gene. It is not an inherited disorder. It just happens spontaneously. And parents are not always given a proper diagnosis right away. However, we're getting better and better at getting earlier diagnosis, because the most important thing for patients with this condition is to make sure they stay out of harm's way. And while there are drugs in development, and there is one that was recently approved in the United States and Canada, the future is really to try to find the best solutions to give them the optimal outcomes so they can live their longest and best life. And I think the problem is that no one does get triggered. However, there are a couple of really what we call crystalline symptoms that happen fairly early in a child's life. They're almost always born with very unusual looking big toes. They are turned in, and they almost can be mistaken as being bunions, and yet it is a very distinctive observable symptom of young children that are born with FOP, but it's often overlooked. But generally what happens is a child may be born with these very unusual looking feet, and then later, sometimes in their infancy or a little later in life, they start to show lumps and bumps. And we call them lumps and bumps to be more accessible to parents. But these lumps and bumps can often be mistaken as cancer. And the key is to not have a misdiagnosis and to make sure they get to a physician who can recognize this kind of very small constellation of early symptoms, which is the turned in toes and the lumps and bumps, because we want them to think FOP. So we have an opportunity to really try to heighten the awareness. We have a campaign that I've worked on for rare disease awareness called Go Feet First. We're encouraging nurses in hospitals around the world to kind of do that full body check. When children are born, they say, well, do they have 10 fingers and 10 toes? Well, look at everything. And it's a simple rule-out diagnosis. There's an easily accessible genetic test for FOP, and it can be ruled out. I was quite proud of it. It was important to me because, as I often say in rare disease, rising tides raise all ships. We were not in business to try to compete in any way with the family organizations that are already in place throughout the world. It's really exciting that FOP has a large international foundation. It has smaller, more family-run groups in other countries throughout the world. But our job is to get those patients and the parents who are hoping to get a concrete diagnosis to those other families and create connectivity so they don't feel alone. Because together we're mighty, and alone we are scared. I think one of the things that's been coming up this week that is really starting to resonate even more with me is that you develop these endpoints that you hope will be the actual basis of approval for your label, but they're developed sometimes 4 and 5 years before your trial is completed. Things can change during a clinical trial course for rare disease drugs. Some patients drop out because they become lost to follow-up. Sometimes you have things where certain patients are excluded because there's exclusion criteria that come up based on things that aren't expected. So you may start with a certain number of patients and end up with a smaller number. And it's important to understand, what is that data telling us? And what are we learning as we go? And sometimes what it means is that the data needs to be reanalyzed. And I think that we are seeing, at least here in the US, and I hope also around the world, that they are willing to take a harder look and a closer look. The regulatory authorities, to understand that it needs to have such a special lens, because the numbers of patients that are in these clinical trials are never going to be large. And we need to collectively understand the data and what it means for the future of creating solutions for people and their families. As of late, one of the hot buzzwords, two words actually, are health equity. And health equity can be misconstrued. But to me, what health equity means is reaching people all over, making sure we're bringing care to people and not missing the diversity of our populations. They are rare, but they're also diverse, and we need to do that. And to do that, we need to bring patients along from countries all over the world, but we need to make sure we're bringing them along in the process. And yesterday when I spoke on a panel here at the WODC, we talked about bench to bedside, and one of my friends and someone that I consider, a close friend, Amanda Callie, who is the founder of Tin Soldiers Global, said, maybe we need to go backwards, bedside to bench, because on a lot of these rare diseases, we've learned a lot through natural history studies. We know a lot. We need to know what we know and then make sure that when we're at the bench, we're designing the right clinical trials with the right outcomes. We're working with patients and their families so that when we get to phase 2 and phase 3, and then ultimately, hopefully to approval, we have something that truly resonates with not just the regulatory authorities, but to a very critical end partner, which is the payers. I love that, we talk sometimes about bench to bedside, but what about bedside to bench? So being a mom who had a son that was born with a rare form of muscular dystrophy that was 1 in 50,000, I always remember, even though I was a fairly, I thought, confident, scientifically grounded pharmaceutical executive, I was so scared and I felt so alone. I felt like I was on an island. And I was so grateful that we had a small family-run, very grassroots group that I actually found on a little website that helped me get answers that I needed. I think that we need to help these organizations stay centered. We need to help them, because when you go to the big, large organizations, it's one of many, a myriad of maybe 150, 300 conditions. And what I've been so appreciative about, and what I've learned from working in the FOP space, is that grassroots family connectivity can help keep patients out of harm's way, can help families feel tethered and until we find the answers that we so desperately seek. But we need these grassroots organizations, and we should be helping them, and we should be supporting them and not rolling them into much larger, broader organizations. The broader organizations are great, they can fundraise, but these family organizations, I think, are what really makes the heart tick.